Hello there, and a huge welcome to this week's Gina Gardiner and Friends show. And today I have a very special gentleman called Joe Templin. He's a human Kaizen expert, an ultra marathoner, a special needs parent, a martial arts champion, an autodidactic polymath, and author of the Amazon Kindle #1 new release, Everyday Excellence. And ultimately, we've been talking before the show, and our missions are so closely aligned that I'm absolutely thrilled to have him on the show. So, Joe, a huge, huge welcome. Thank you very much for joining me.
Gina, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk with you and the listeners that get a chance to basically be the fly on the wall for our conversation.
Well, I wish we'd captured the conversation before I press the record button, but we're in for a great show. Before we get started on talking about our theme, which is choosing the harder path, just give people a potted version of your story. How have you come to be here and have this amazing mission that we're going to be talking about?
Oh, so how much time do we have here?
Well,
I've
the
got a
longer
very
you spend on your story,
eclectic,
the less time we've got to spend on your mission.
I've got a very eclectic background. I'm basically a human Swiss Army knife. So to boil it all down, one of 6 kids, farm kid. My mom, the nun. Yes, my mom was a nun. My dad was Army military, became a consultant. Severely asthmatic. I died. Obviously, I got better. Started doing Taekwondo. Started college at 13 because my parents said 12 was too young. Ended up winning a world championship in Taekwondo. Made weapons for the Department of Defense. Went into finance. Started studying psychology. Started ultra running along the way. Wrote a book called Everyday Excellence. Try and help people out. What you want to talk about?
Well, I'd like to start by talking about your mission. And you have a humongous mission, one that resonates very much with my own. So would you like to share that with people?
Sure. So, like most authors, my initial goal was to sell a lot of books. And I realized that was incredibly selfish. That was self-focused. And my mom, the nun, would have come down from heaven and smacked me in the back of the head for that sort of mission. So thinking about it and talking with my core advisors and the people that are important to me, I realized that it's actually much more important than that. What I'm tasked with doing, it's not even like a goal, it's a mission. I'm so driven that I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning thinking about it, is reaching out and being able to help and positively impact in some capacity 100 million people over the next 12 months so that they can make a slightly better decision in their life, so that they're happier, healthier, more productive, better parent, better partner, better coworker, and move them in a positive direction in some way to help offset the entropy and ennui that we're seeing in the world.
As I look and I listen to your mission and I think about the number of people who you see in the media or you speak to that who are struggling because of their physical health or their mental health, that emotionally they are unhappy, that spiritually they have not yet realized that they are on a spiritual journey and that life is here for learning. And I'm just struck by your wish to support and help people. And before we started recording the show, you were giving some statistics about health and happiness. And I think it would be really important to share that with our listeners.
So according to the CDC, roughly 3/4 of Americans are overweight and half of them are clinically obese, which leads to all these other health problems down the road. And it actually was one of the reasons why COVID hit the United States so harshly, is because it compounded these comorbidity factors. Combine that with the fact that 75% of Americans hate their job. So they're spending 40 plus hours a week someplace that they hate. Then they go home, sit on the couch, and eat Cheetos and watch The Bachelor or some other, stuff like that and rot their mind. And there's a reason why the graduating class of 2019, which is the last year that I had statistics for, 40% of them sought treatment for anxiety. Sought treatment. So that means that probably another 20 or 30% of them had issues that they did not go and see some help for. So if you look basically across the board, 3/4 of the people, and this is in America, are overweight and or hate what they do for a living and or under incredible mental duress and not really able to deal with it. And these are all things that they're not under our control, but they're under our influence. And they're different. Control is I press this button and something comes on out. I pull the lever and I get the exact result. But under our influence, we can make better choices. The micro decisions that we make on a daily basis. Do I eat the donut or do I eat the healthy food? Do I sit on the couch or do I go for a walk around the block? Do I, read a bodice ripper or watch mind-numbing TV? Or do I go and try and learn something to better myself so I can be in a better position job-wise? It's these little decisions. Zeno of Citium was the founder of Stoicism, and he said that well-being is no small thing, but it's made up of small steps. And so that's a model. In fact, it's the cover of my book. It's the cool nonlinear growth curve, because if we do little things better on a regular basis, the long-term results are going to be spectacular. I'm an ultra marathoner. You don't just roll out of bed and run 100 miles one day. You start by going around the block, then you do 5Ks, then you do 10Ks, then you do 20Ks, then you do and half marathons, then full marathons, and then you can stretch it on out. You can't become a guitar wizard like Dr. Sir Brian May overnight. You need to practice over time. And so anything that is worthwhile is going to take a while. And people need to start focusing on doing the little things better on a consistent basis. And over a month, 2 months, 3 months, they'll be amazed at the change that they can make in their life.
There's so much that you've offered that offers people a really profound way forward. I talk to people very much about taking radical responsibility for their thoughts, their emotions, their actions, their language. And when you do that, it means that you have control over you. And that's the only thing you've got control over. You haven't got control over other people or the political world or the weather, but you can control what you put on your plate and what you eat. And, you're talking about a wonderful mission, which is to help people make better decisions. What about the person who says, well, that's my choice. If I want to make decisions and I want to eat 47 donuts, what's that got to do with you?
Well, when I have to turn around and pay the tab for your 47 donuts, not now, but 20 years from now, when you have a heart attack and are diabetic and all that, well, then I do have a right to talk about it a little bit. But before we went to break, Gina, you were asking the question of why so many people are using shopping or sex or alcohol or food or narcotics to numb themselves.
Yeah.
And it made me think about what Dr. Gabriel Maté talks about. He's up in Canada, that all addiction really is a symptom of trauma that has been unresolved. And if you look at the Polish psychiatrist or psychologist, Dombrowski, a lot of his work was around post-traumatic growth, because we all have trauma in our life. We all have bad stuff that happens. That's called life. The question is, how are you going to react? Are you going to shut down, or are you going to get up and you're going to fight? Are you going to be traumatized and say, woe is me, I'm the victim, it's beyond my control? Or are you going to say, no, I almost swore that. I'm glad that I did.
I'm very glad.
Stand on up and be ready to fight and say, I can do this all day like Captain America does. So are you going to take it, or are you going to say, no, I'm not going to just take it. I'm going to defeat this. I'm going to use this as fuel. I'm going to use this to make myself better. Because failure is feedback, as I say. So too many people are like, oh, I failed that test, or, somebody treated me poorly, or I had abuse, or, my father was an alcoholic or whatever. And they're like using that as an excuse to essentially lay down and die. at least internally, as opposed to saying, no, that's not what I'm going to take. That's not how I'm going to be. My father was an alcoholic. Because of that, I'm going to fight against it, and I'm going to be an example. And it comes down to the old saying, preach the gospel, and if necessary, use words. So I have kids, and my kids know what is right and wrong, not because I stand on a soapbox and tell them, because I show them in the little things like, hey, look, I'm prepping dinner, come help me. And so they learn to cook, and they learn to cook healthy food. They see me studying when they were studying. I was doing work too. They see me take care of my plates and clean up. And if I'm walking down the street and there's, a piece of garbage, I pick it up and throw it in the trash, because that's what my parents told me. And so doing these little things can create positive ripple effects. And you're not going to necessarily go from a morose attitude and be Pollyanna right away. But every single day, we have between 50 and 80,000 thoughts. And most of them are just programmed in, they're automatic.
Yeah.
And most of them tend to be negative. So if we can just bend the curve on that and have a couple of better thoughts per day, or make it so that our environment's set up to make slightly better decisions, have healthier food around, have the running shoes, or what do you guys call them, trainers, set out so that you actually trip over them. So you're like, oh, I might as well put them on and go around the block once. And it's those little choices that add up to a much better attitude. And then that attitude reflects itself in terms of the physical and financial decisions that we make.
I think what you say is it's so true. If you think about most people's lives, you've already alluded to the fact that most of our thoughts are habitual. They go into a pattern which doesn't cross the conscious mind at all. And when you're talking about, do I have to consciously remember to breathe, or for my cells to duplicate? Well, that's great that's at an unconscious level. But when our thoughts and our actions and our words are based on beliefs that were installed a long time ago and we've never questioned them, and habitual patterns of behavior, it's very easy to get caught in that spiral which takes you down. And that the more negative you are, the more you focus on the negative, the more negative you become. One of the strategies that I've used myself, and I've used a lot with clients, is that of collecting gratitudes. Because if you imagine the brain to be an old-fashioned vinyl record, it gets stuck in the groove. And we've got to get out of that groove. And I think collecting gratitudes is a great way to do it. And you make it very simple. You start off first thing in the morning, I'm grateful to be alive. There's a silly little strategy, which is to flap your wings as if you're a chicken, and to think, can I feel the side of my coffin? Well, no, it's a new day. I choose to be alive. So you can do the funky chicken. It makes you smile. But then go through the day really noticing things to be grateful for, and make it easy. So for me, hot water, having a hot shower, I'm very grateful that I can turn on my hot water and know that 99.9 times out of 100, the hot water's there.
So can I make a comment on that?
Yeah,
actually?
of course you can.
So instead of just noticing it, one of the things from a psychology point of view is either capturing it or sharing it with another.
Right.
So if you write it down, like I always carry index cards because my mom taught me to do that, write down, oh, I had this great cheeseburger, or I saw this little kid playing and laughing, or I saw this really cool sunset. So writing those down is one way to further reinforce it. And if you write it physically, you get the haptic feedback as opposed to typing it on your phone. But even more than that, if you look at the Course of Happiness from Yale University, Laurie Santos teaches this, is sharing that gratitude. So if I see a really beautiful flower, I will take a picture of it and share it with a couple of friends. If I see a great sunset, I will capture it and share it with individuals, because I have this wonderful little bit of joy, this gratitude. But when you share it, it's the whole idea behind Thanksgiving dinner. You give it to others too. And I have now given them a gift of happiness, and they'll open up the picture and they'll smile. They might like a comment, come on, Templin, what are you doing? But but by doing that, it actually multiplies it.
That's a great a great way of doing it. And actually the sharing bit, I think, is an incredibly positive and powerful way. But if you during the day collect those gratitudes, and then last thing at night before you go to sleep, scan the day and relive those gratitudes. And this is a great thing to do with your children. Get them to collect gratitudes, and then before they go to bed, so what's today's gratitudes? And then the strategy that I use with people, I ask them to have a gratitude book by the side of their bed. And as they scan the day, to collect and write down their gratitudes. I call it a thank bank. Just like when you are investing money in your bank, you gain extra interest, that when you're having a bad day, you can go to your thank bank and you can capitalize on the interest that you have created.
Gina, you've given me two wonderful phrases that I'm going to steal, so thank you. Radical responsibility and thank bank. I'm going to use both of those.
And I think, we have so much to be grateful for. We live in the most amazing world. And, if you say, well, I'm in a block of flats, I haven't got a garden, it's hard to get to the natural world. You can look out of the window and you can see the clouds and actually just be in the moment. Because I think one of the other challenges, and I'd be really interested in your opinion, but one of the other challenges that I think so many people struggle with is that they're either focusing on the past and worrying about what they did do or they didn't do. If only I'd done it that, or I should have done that. Or they're anxious about the future, about things which may never happen. And so all of that focus and that energy is spent on things that you have no control over and very often are negative. Whereas if you can spend some time each day living in the moment, of course it's important to plan strategically, but to be flexible about that. But I think we as a society many people have lost the capacity to just be in the moment. We're human doings and not human beings.
And the prevalence of smartphones and social media has compounded that in a lot of ways, because people can always go on the 5,000 apps that they have on their phone and do all this instead of actually just sitting there with themselves. And so this is one of the reasons why we've got a mental health crisis, is it's in the darkness that you discover your own demons. You can face them and subjugate them and use their power. If we wanted to go all Jungian and talk about the shadow, but being able to be bored is important for kids. Being able to sit there and not have the constant feed, the constant dopamine hit of social media and everything else, to just live in the moment, to breathe, as you were saying. This is something that for the past probably 10, 12 years, we've been losing. And unfortunately, the younger generations, because they've grown up with all the screens all the time and the constant flash, it's like basically growing up inside a casino. They're so overstimulated and used to that they can't handle just sitting there quietly listening to the birds and watching the sunset.
They've done quite a lot of research now about teenagers and people in their early 20s, where the brain is not fully mature. And I don't know about in the US, but in the UK, over half the prescriptions are for antidepressants. Great book by Johann Hari, by the way, called Lost Connections. And if you are someone who has depression, it's a great book to read. But what struck me is that they did some research about how young people got on with antidepressants, which are not designed for the immature brain.
No.
And they then took those same children who had failed to thrive on medication, and they gave them talking therapy, and they got them out into the forest and into nature, getting their hands dirty, actually just being in that environment where there wasn't such a thing as a phone or a computer or an electronic game. And very quickly, in literally in 4 or 5 weeks, the mental health of that young person had improved immeasurably. And I think as a society, we've really got to start thinking about what we are doing to the young, to tomorrow's generation, both in terms of what we're modeling, but also in terms of how we treat them and how we teach them to be able to take radical responsibility, to be authentically who they are, and to have a great attitude towards themselves and towards others. So I want you to think, as we go into the end of the program, if you're listening to this, how can you help yourself? We've got a bit of a technical problem and Joe's disappeared. I'm hopeful that he will come back into the recording. But how can you help yourself? If you're one of those people who is overweight, what's the reason for it? Why is it that eating has given you something to... So, if you're someone who is struggling with your weight or you're finding it difficult, Joe, what would you suggest are going to be some strategies to help? And we've talked about gratitudes, we've talked about a number of things, but, in the last few minutes of the program, what are your 2 or 3 real pearls of wisdom?
So I'm glad you used pearls, because that's actually the phrase that I use, the pearls of wisdom or pearls of excellence. One, if somebody's struggling with something, whether it's weight, mental health, relationship issue, one thing that they need to do is to do the smallest possible sustainable change.
Okay.
So James Clear talks about this in habit stacking. So get up in the morning and walk for 5 minutes. Don't go run for 20, 30 minutes. Okay, don't try and do anything like that. Just get up and walk every morning. And after a couple of weeks, it will start changing your identity and how you see yourself. Then you can, go from 5 minutes to 15 minutes. That's easy, but it's basically creating it within your habit stack, as James Clear says, or just your self-identity that you do this every single day. And so that will then be able to carry forward. And it's the littlest, simplest thing. Get up and walk. Don't bring chips into the house. Little things like that can create a large difference over time. That's one thing. Another thing is that you need to set up the environment for success. So when I'm working with people who are suffering from PTSD, or if I'm working with a business person and they want to change the curve of their business and have more success, I make them rearrange the office. Because if you come on in and you're sitting in the same chair, looking at the same plaques on the wall, and have everything around you the same, you're going to default to doing the same things you did previously. So Dr. Johan Stolk from the Netherlands and I had some clients we were working with who had PTSD veterans, and they'd always sit in the same chairs.
Yeah.
In their house. So we made them burn the chair, because that was a good, psychological thing. But now they've got a different feel. It looks different. And we made them rearrange the room, and it didn't instantly cure them. There's no silver bullet like that, but went a long way to make them develop new neural pathways, to look at things in different light, essentially. Or actually literally, because we got new light too. So these little things that then prep you mentally and environmentally for more success. And then have a goal. I mean, people who stop smoking, it's because they're told, if you don't stop smoking, you're not going to walk your daughter down the aisle.
Yes.
Or you're not going to see your grandchild graduate from high school. They have a big why. As Nietzsche says, if a man has a strong enough why, he can overcome any how. So do these little things that change the environment, change the mindset, and change your actions, but have a big reason, something that's really important as to why. And if you have the combination of the big and the little, the macro and the micro, the combination balance of it, the push and pull, is going to help you make the changes that you need to make to achieve what you want to achieve.
Absolutely brilliant. Sadly, we're pretty well out of time.
Having fun.
Where can people find you?
Maybe in the pub, but they can find my book on Amazon, especially if they're outside of the United States. So there's hard copies and Kindle. They can also go to my website, which is everyday-excellence.com. That's everyday-excellence.com. And the podcasts live there. They can get the books. There's a daily blog. There's a link to the YouTube channel. So it's an entire environment where people can get a lot of free, quick hit information and help to be able to make better decisions so that they can unlock their personal excellence.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. You'll have to come back onto the show. And thank you so much for listening. Do please encourage other people to listen. We donate meals for the number of listeners that come onto the show. So the more listeners, the more meals that we donate. Also, if you'd like to speak to me or to work with me, or you'd just like to say what you think of the show, my email is Gina, Gina, at genuinely-u.com. And the website is genuinely-u.com. You'll find lots of resources and lots of links to other things. So thanks again for joining me. Please do join me on the next show. Bye-bye now.